and Seikyo stared down each other, standing in the remains of a ruined city, which was actually the sim room. "You ready?" Le asked, folding his arms and staring at Seikyo confidently. "Are you? You seem rather smug, considering you're facing an immortal, which I don't see why you should be," Seikyo said. "My power grows every day." Lee's body then exploded with a red aura. "Even you won't be a threat to me for much longer." "Very well then," Seikyo chuckled. "Let us begin." Scope. Immediately, Le teleported away, leaving Seikyo on high alert. Looking around for Le. After a while of just nothing, she started getting a bit frustrated. "You know, running your mouth like that only to run away like a coward is rather embarrassing." Scope. Stab. Seikyo didn't even have time to react to Le teleporting behind her before he stabbed her through the back with a chaos lance. Scope. Kaboom. Le teleported away, as the lance exploded inside Seikyo, utterly obliterating her body in a big explosion. Meanwhile, Le had teleported onto what remained of a large building, looking down at the smoking crater, where dark energy swelled. "Looks like I destroyed her body. Good. That means I can move on to the next part." Le raised his hand up in front of him and closed his eyes. Chaos wave. A very weak wave of chaos energy shot out of his hand, encompassing the area in front of him, and continuing on for a little while, before coming back at him. Once the energy went back into his body, Le felt an intense headache, as the energy painted a detailed picture of the world in front of him, including revealing the location of the several couriers that were feeding Seikyo energy. Chaos Wave was essentially a form of sonar. He'd send out a wave of energy in front of him. That was so weak it couldn't be seen, felt, or heard by most people. That energy would move over an area, before coming back to Le after a certain point. Once it came back, the energy would paint a complete picture of everything in front of him that the energy touched, including things that were invisible or disguised by illusions. It was a very useful move, and one he was glad G had helped him come up with. However, it did have a few very notable drawbacks. First of all, he had to stay completely still for the duration of the process, and he needed to have his eyes closed the whole time, otherwise, he'd suffer from complete sensory overload. And even with his eye closed, the information being forced into his brain still hurts quite a bit. In other words, it left him a sitting duck for about half a minute. Fortunately, with Seikyo's body still forming, he had some time. Le formed some chaos spears and took a second to focus. Homing chaos spears. Lee's spears shot out, curving through the air towards their targets, Le awkwardly guiding them along. BAW, BAW, BAW. The spears impaled the dark birds, destroying all the ones he'd detected in a matter of seconds. "All right. Now for the ones on the other side," Lu said, turning around and once again using Chaos Wave, before forming more spears. Homing Chaos Spears. B.A. Babakak. Once again the Grimm were destroyed, leaving naught but dark smoke in the wind. "Okay, that should be most of them," Lu said, rubbing his temples to try and alleviate his headache. "There might be one or two more that I missed, so let's dash." Kaboom! Suddenly a bolt of dark energy blasted at him from below, blowing up the rooftop he was on and sending him flying. "Ack!" Lu hissed in pain as he was hurled into the air. Suddenly his body was encompassed by a dark aura, and he was slammed into the ground. Slam! 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 Psycho had recovered and was now using her telekinesis to lift Lu up and slam him down. Squawk! That was until Lu teleported out of her attack, once again vanishing from sight. "Don't think I'll fall for the same trick twice," Sakio said, forming a strong barrier around her body. Squawk! Slam! Suddenly Lu teleported above her, with a large piece of a destroyed building. The ruble fell on top of her, squishing half her body, and trapping the rest of her. Squawk! 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 Lu continued to teleport large pieces of rubble onto Sakio, trapping her further underneath a massive, heavy pile of concrete and metal. Ugh! Lu fell to one knee beside the massive pile of rubble. Teleporting such large objects put a heavy strain on his body. His rings were once again glowing and hot, as he stained them as well. "I hope this works." Meanwhile, underneath all the rubble, Sakio struggled. She tried to use her telekinesis to move some of the rubble, but it was too heavy. She could try to blast her way out, but she lacked the power to do so without leaving herself completely squashed. And she couldn't regenerate if something was occupying the space her body was supposed to be in. Lu had destroyed most of her couriers, meaning he'd weakened her quite a bit. Both the house and the abyss were too far for her to draw from, so the only place she could seek power from was the lab, which was just close enough. Unfortunately, the negative energy from there just wasn't enough to get her out of this. In other words, she'd lost. After deactivating the sim room and freeing Psycho from the rubble, and in new clothes, the two of them headed to Giza, who had been watching the whole thing from the control room. "Very well done, Lu," Giza praised, looking down at the two kids. Lu looked ridiculously smug, while Psycho looked far more sullen. "Your strategy was well thought out, and your new techniques were impressive," Giza continued. "There was only one notable flaw in your plan. What? Lu asked, turning from smug to skeptical. Let's say that Psycho went on the defensive before you could destroy her body. How would you have handled that? Giza asked. You would have been left using up a lot of energy to try and destroy her body. And even if you eventually succeeded, you may have been too worn out to fully execute your plan. Which brings me to you, Psycho. Giza shook his head. Your regeneration has caused you to grow careless. While it is a powerful ability, it does not guarantee victory. As this battle has shown, defeat comes in many forms. When your opponent hides themselves, you should first make sure you're not vulnerable to attack. Then ask yourself, why is your opponent hiding? Are they trying to escape? Are they waiting for something? Or are they trying to ambush you? Then, after you've determined the most likely course of action, decide your response. The worst thing you can do is stand out in the open, waiting for them to attack you. It does sound really stupid when you say it, Sakio said, blushing with embarrassment. If you want an example of what to do when an opponent uses stealth, perhaps you should watch Himiko and Mu's battle, Giza said. It should be starting now. You ready? Himiko asked as she held her wooden knife. Mu nodded from underneath the cloth he was hiding under. The two had set the sim room to look like an abandoned warehouse, with dim lighting and shadows everywhere. Lots of boxes, machines, and the like to hide behind, and catwalks hanging above them. Let's go then, Himiko said, giving him a crazed smile. Mu threw off the sheet, vanishing using his quirk before Himiko could see him. Himiko then ran behind one of the crates, with Mu following to try and ambush her. But as soon as he turned the corner of the crate, he found that Himiko had vanished. He started frantically looking around for her, but it was no use. He'd lost her. Mu had been searching the warehouse for quite some time. He didn't know how long exactly, but long enough that he knew he wasn't going to win like this. He hadn't managed to get even a glimpse of Himiko, and if he kept this up, he was going to use up all of the time he had spent in his dimension, and if that happened, Himiko would win without a doubt. That meant he had to be a bit more daring and lure her out. Mu exited his dimension and put his back up against a crate, making sure she couldn't attack him from behind. He had to keep an eye out on both his sides and his front, lest he be blindsided. Ding! Suddenly Mu felt something fall on his head, and he immediately panicked, looking up, scared that Himiko would attack from above. Only to find nothing. And before he could even tilt his head down, he felt a wooden knife being pressed against his throat. He looked to the side and saw Himiko looking at him with a smug grin. I win. It took a second, but Mu realized what had happened. Himiko had hidden on the other side of the crate, threw one of her wooden knives over it to distract him, and then quickly went in for the finishing blow. Mu pouted. "You're way too good at this. Well, that was boring." Luke groaned as he watched the fight end. Most of the fight was literally not a fight. It was Himiko running around trying to avoid Mu, and Mu trying to find her, neither of whom they could see. Then it just ended abruptly. He probably would have fallen asleep if Giza hadn't kept slapping him awake any time he started to drift off. Not all confrontations are filled with excitement, Giza explained. But this battle was a good display of how to deal with stealth. Firstly, when Himiko saw Mu vanish, her strategy was to leave his sight as well. Then, since she couldn't see him at all, she made sure to stay hidden in places that he couldn't see as well, namely using shadows and high-up places. Once Mu realizes his current tactic isn't going to work, he attempts to lure out his opponent while covering one of his blind spots. His issue, however, was that he didn't consider that Himiko might attack him from above. In fairness, it would have been extremely difficult for her to attack directly from above, but Himiko utilized this in a brilliant way, using her opponent's tension against him, distracting him by making him think she was attacking from an unforeseen direction, before going for the finishing maneuver. "Yeah, she is too good at this," La noted. In that position, Mu's best option would have been to immediately vanish back into his dimension as soon as he realized he was under attack, and attempt to counterattack, Giza said. However, that would require reflexes and skill that can only be built through experience. So I can hardly blame him for his loss there. Regardless, Seikyo, do you understand what you did wrong during your fight? Yes, sir. Seikyo nodded attentively. Very good, Giza said. You two are dismissed. Stay sharp, and enjoy your day.